Are you ready to stop riding the emotional elevator of life? Are you ready to learn how to elevate your emotions that keep you psychologically traumatized or in an addictive behavior? You are in the right place. Here is your host, Sandee Byrd, trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach of the Emotional Elevator Show.
Welcome, everyone. It is the show about fear. First, let me just say you're listening to Sandee Byrd. I might, throughout points of the show, not sound like myself, but this is Sandee Byrd on Emotional Elevator on Inspired Choices Network. And yes, I'm suffering from some good old allergies here in the state of Richmond, Virginia. If you're not familiar with our state, we bloom very well and we have very thick pollen. And I was in New York this past weekend and coming back, I think my body said, nope, you decide to leave. We're going to just hit you fully. So if I start coughing, sneezing, I will apologize. Didn't want to just throw in a show. I wanted to do the show on fear because it's a very good show for me to talk about fear. Because even this weekend, I wanted to face a fear and did not because I didn't want to, but because it just didn't work in the schedule. But fear. And what is your fears? Is your fears really your fears, or have they been fears imposed on you? And I will dive into that. Does your fear protect you, or does it inhibit you from living your full life? So we will talk a lot about that. And I will talk about how to start engaging, not challenging your fear, but engaging in your fear. Those baby steps to really dive into fear. And I will talk a lot about some of my fears, some of my clients' fears, some of the fears we've worked through together, and how rewarding it is to be on the side of fear. Does that mean I am free of all fear? No, I still have fears. And every once in a while, I can tell myself that, you know what? That's okay. I'm working on that. So basically, what fear is, it's that icky emotion where you don't want to step into it because you feel that it is going to be dangerous or something serious is going to happen. I could read you the definition, but it's basically everyone probably knows what fear is. And tonight is all really about fear. And is it something sometimes you're imposed with? And I'm going to get an examples of that. Is it something that protects you? And can it be something that inhibits you from living freely and living your life? Because a lot of people out there, they're afraid to take those steps into what their fear is. And I've been there. And so let me start off by first saying thank you um, to Christine for putting me on Inspired Choices Network. And when I decided to redo a podcast, I had fears. It wasn't that I was afraid, it was that I was fearful that because I had a podcast before and I did not like the way it was, I felt that maybe I might be harmed or maybe I might be taken advantage of doing a second podcast. But that's not the case. I still leaned into it and I embraced that part of it. And I'm very happy I did. So when people ask, like, what makes me an expert on fear? Because I have literally in the last 4 years faced many fears and I'm still facing fears. There's still fears I'm going to face. It's not every day, but when something comes up that I feel that emotion telling me, nope, don't do it, don't do it. You might get hurt. Something could happen. I kind of give into it. I embrace it. Why do I feel I'm going to get hurt? What could happen if I stepped into this? So, as I said, I was in New York this past weekend. New York City. It was my best friend. We raised our kids together. We went to New York City, see Lion King. It was a whole trip that was planned for us that we went on. And we got there very early on that Friday. And of course, going from LaGuardia to, we stayed in Times Square. Anyone knows about New York, that means you have to either take a taxi, which could cost you $100, or you get on the subway, which costs $2.90. Let's see. Do I want to spend $100 or do I want to get on the subway? I did. We took the subway. There was moments, not of fear, just moments of, oh my gosh, I don't know where we're going. What could happen? It wasn't fear because we did it. There wasn't fear involved in that. It was just, oh my gosh, let's make sure we're going the right way and this, that, and the other. So that's more of just being scared. There was no fear. I never felt like I might get harmed. If we ended up in a different part, we can just get back on and go to a different part. Never felt that I was going to be in danger or harm. But there was one adventure I wanted to do this weekend, and it's called the Edge, and it was called the Summit. What that is in New York City is it's either the glass edge where you oversee the whole city, or the actual glass enclosure where you see the city where you can lean into it. A lot of people have probably seen that. That is a big fear of mine, and that's a big fear of hers. We talked about it on Friday when we got there, when we were walking around Times Square. I said, hey, this is what I really want to do this weekend. She's like, I'm not sure. All right, we're going to face the fear together. What better way than to be with somebody who I know also has that fear? To face it together, hold hands, whatever we have to do. Um, she is much smaller than I am, so I would probably engulf her if she was scared. She could probably not engulf me. But anyway, we decided we're going to do it. We're going to bite that bullet. We're going to do it. Well, guess what? Didn't realize that we should have probably had this conversation and really decided a week ago, because you could not get into either place at the times we wanted to go, because Saturday was hop on, hop off all day on the bus. So we couldn't do it. But we were excited because we were willing to do it. We were willing to step into that. So we walked away. We felt good because, we couldn't do it, but we were willing to. We were willing to step on. And I can tell you, the two of us, if we bought those tickets and we were able to go, we were going to go and face that fear, because neither one of us like to waste money. So anyway, that is all about facing a fear. And that fear, I'm still not sure if that is a fear of mine or if it was a fear that was imposed on me, because sometimes parents impose their fears on us. And that's what I mean by imposing fears on us. So I can go back to a story when I was fear. Let's start off here. Let's just start off with the basic. When you're a little kid and your parents say, don't touch that hot stove, they frighten you into being fearful of a stove. But does it really become a fear? Not really, because at one point we all end up having to use a stove. So that is not really a fear. It's just a fear in the moment that you could get burnt, hurt. So we have that until we understand. But there's a lot of kids out there that do kind of want to touch the stove. So is it scarcity? Is it fear? That's one I question, only because it's like it's an inherited feeling. Don't touch a hot oven. And no parent's going to say, okay, let me put your hand on the oven. That would be considered abuse. But anyway, when I was a kid and when I coach people, when you can remember the vivid details of reoccurrences in your life, that is a traumatic event and it stays in your subconscious. What I mean by that is, if you have a fear of subways, and I'm like, well, did something happen to you when you were a child on a subway? No, I can't recall. Oh, yeah, I can. When I was 6, I was wearing my favorite pink dress. I was licking a lollipop, and I was with my uncle Tony, and he had on the shoes that I love so much, and he had this cool gold watch. and someone got hurt on the subway, and you can remember those details. You can remember every bit of that detail because that is a traumatic event that happened to you, and it instilled fear in you. It instilled that fear in you. But same scenario. Oh yeah, when I was a kid and I was on the subway with my uncle Tony, and someone got hurt on the subway. That might not be a fear of yours, but then all of a sudden your mom would say, "No, I don't ever want you to go on the subway." And if I'm screaming at you, I apologize. I'm looking at getting a better mic, but that is now becoming an imposed fear. But when you remember detail to detail and now you're scared to get on the subway, that is a fear because that is something that you internally have that strong emotion, that almost anxious emotion. Oh, the subway, I could get hurt on the subway. That is your own fear. But when you're like, oh, I want to go on the subway. Oh, you don't want to go on the subway. And someone's questioning you and pushing their fear. That's they're imposing their own fear on you. So when I was a child, this is something that I realized I held on to because I don't remember the events as vividly, but I do remember it being something that every time I got close to an edge, my mom was like, "Don't get too close." She put her own fear in me of what she witnessed happen to me. So if you're from the Richmond area, the Maymont, the park used to have, and I think sometimes it has water running down it when it rains a lot, but they used to have a waterfall and it always had water running down. And I think it recycled itself. Well, one day we were there. I do remember a lot of the details, but we were there and my brother and I were on it. He went and sat down, and my mom said, "Maybe you should come and sit down." And I turned and I slipped on slime. Now, if anyone knows, it's basically rocks, and then there is a good drop, not a huge drop, but I would have either been severely injured or I probably could have died considering I was probably 8. But see, I don't remember a lot of the events. I don't know if I blocked it out or if it just wasn't a true fear because I was a child. But all I know is I started going down and a guy was able to put his foot in and get me and basically save me. It was okay. I got scratched up a little bit. I was okay. But then my mom embraced it. "Oh my God, don't ever do that again to me." And it was a traumatic event for her. And then from then on, anytime I went near some, "Oh, don't get too close." So that became a fear of mine because it was imposed on me. Now, if my mom might have never reacted to that, I probably would have walked up on ledges. I probably would have gone on top of cliffs. I probably would have been okay. But because it was always such a dramatic event whenever I got close to something, and I understand that I developed a fear, a strong fear of going up on a cliff or up on a mountain or climbing or anything like that. If I know I can walk and get out to somewhere, I would do it. So 2 years ago in Greece, over top of the water, there was these cliffs, very high cliffs. I was the only one in our group that went to the cliff, and a guy comes walking up behind me and goes, "If you want, I'll help you go down a little bit because there's another little ledge path down here." I was like, "No, no, no, I'm fine where I am, but thank you." And I started getting a little nervous feeling because nobody else is around but him and I. And I'm like, he's like, "Oh, I'll help you." And I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm fine." But I did it. I overcame that. And I realized, you know what? I can be safe and I can do things the right way and I'll be fine. Same thing as when I was in Arizona with my daughter 4 years ago. We went climbing and I was fine. I was safe. Some of the things she didn't want to do, so I was fine not doing it. But if she would have said, "Hey, I want to go up on this big rock and do these big things," I might have been, "No, I'm good." But I'm doing a lot of that now where I'm stepping into it and realizing that those were more imposed fears on me than were my own fears. So let's back up in my life. in my life, I was a swim coach and a lifeguard, and I taught swimming lessons to many children. And I remember when, excuse me, I remember with children when they were fearful of the water and they didn't want to put their face in, and they were like, and I do remember asking the moms, like, what do you feel about the water? And when I knew that they were fearful of the water, I'm like, look, in order for your child to really do swimming lessons, and you don't have to do this in front of your child, I want you to be comfortable in the water. And I need you to also be able to put your face in the water and show your child it's okay. I would say for half, 75% of the moms said, okay, I'll do it and everything like that. Let's do it alone first and then bring my child in, because I guess if they freaked out, they didn't want their child to see that. So I did that a lot with parents, because I realized that most kids who fear water are because their parents fear water. So there's no use in getting them comfortable in the water if they go somewhere and the parents like, come closer, they're going to start imposing that fear on them. Oh my goodness. It's time for our first break. Here I've been just babbling on about fear, and hopefully it really resonates to you and you understand what imposed fear is, and what real fear is, and sometimes how we can just like have a traumatic event and we don't impose a fear on us. But then sometimes when we have something and somebody keeps reminding of us, how it becomes a true fear within us. But we are going to go on our first break. You, of course, are joining me tonight on Inspired Choices Network. This is the Emotional Elevator. And even though if you're just listening to me, might not sound totally like myself, you are listening to Sandee Byrd. So we are going to go to our first break.
Are you living a life of psychological trauma or suffering from an addiction? Are you ready to learn new techniques to elevate your emotions without sustaining or obtaining them from substances that are not good for your mind or body? Then continue to tune into Emotional Elevator with trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach, Sandee Byrd, where you will learn techniques to elevate your emotions that don't require a magic pill, food, or impulsive behavior. Listen to Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific, on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd. To participate in this program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to sandy@emotionalelevator.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back. I was giving examples of imposed fear and fear that is ours, but it becomes more so ours when we have someone imposing their own fear on our fear. And excuse me, sorry about that. But as I was saying, is sometimes as parents, I'm a parent, whenever something happens to our child and we see it, we try to warn them. Sorry, I feel like I'm probably going to need to drink some water. We warn them about it, and it ends up imposing a fear on them. And what I meant by that was an example I gave where I almost, I fell on a waterfall and I almost went over the side. yes, I could have been harmed seriously. I possibly could have died. I wasn't. I had a guy reach out, grab me, everything. And I was young enough to not remember every detail about it. I do remember it. I do remember I slipped on slime. But every single time I wanted to go close to like an edge or something, my mom, no, 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 no. So might I never feared that? Not sure, but I think not. But her, because she became so fearful of that event that she imposed her fear of falling or, I mean, she did not like to climb things or anything like that. So she also imposed that on me because she witnessed me almost falling to possibly being seriously injured or to my death. Like I said, sorry. So that is a fear that became my fear, but do I 100% believe that it was my fear? Maybe 20%. I would have been a little bit more cautious, but I was young enough to still want to explore. But I want to say 75% of it probably had a lot to do with my mother and really, and I do understand being a mother, really seeing where I could have been seriously harmed or possibly died in an accident where she just, oh no, don't get close to a side. Like she really imposed that fear on me. So another big fear, and a lot of people have this fear, is fear of flying. And for me, I flew a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot as a child because my family was New Jersey. We moved to Virginia. My father was in Florida. So the only way really to get from place to place was to fly. And so I did fly a lot. I also was involved in it was a semi crash landing. It was kind of a crash landing. Because we had to walk then to the airport, because we broke the wheels. Something. I don't remember all of it, but I do know that happened. But were we got to the ground. We got thrown out of the air and we got to the ground and everything was fine. Nothing blew up, nothing. There was, I guess, sparks, flames. I don't remember all of it. But I then had to continue to fly. But then as I got older and I had my own children, that became a fear because I was on an airplane, couldn't tell you, and I kind of stopped flying after that because I was on one where it was a little airplane and we left out of upstate New York to come down here to Richmond. And it was a little airplane and it was, yeah, I don't know what we flew into, but it did, it rocked my world. And I just thought from then on, I'm not going to fly because I've got children that are responsible. I had a disabled husband. I'm not going to fly. And it was a good thing. But I realized that I wanted to adventure. I wanted to see things again. You can't get to Greece unless you go by a boat and stuff, and that would take forever. So I decided to start flying again. I flew in the States a few times, and then I took my international flight, my first major international flight, because sorry, sorry, Canada and Mexico and down there, I don't feel that's truly international. Um, but my first flight to Greece, and I did it by myself. Didn't have anyone with me, nothing. And I got on a big airplane and I flew across the sea by myself. I faced a fear of my own, and it was the most rewarding experience of my life. I got on the plane. It was the smoothest. Both flights back and forth were amazing. And I faced a fear. And those are fears that I feel like are easy to face. Now, let's start talking about the fears that sometimes we have. And one of the major fears I had, because to me, those are little fears. Those are fears you can overcome because you can You can take something, like a lot of people fly and they take something to relax themselves so that they do feel comfortable flying. I, of course, did not take anything on an international flight because I was more scared that it was just, I didn't. So I experienced it completely awake, enjoyed it, watched a movie. I was completely my natural, organic self. But we're done talking about those topics. The other fears, and these are ones that are a little bit harder to engage in, but you've got to engage in them. And that is the fear of failure. That is a true fear. That by the fear of failure is that not necessarily harm somebody, but that I could harm myself with the fear of failure. I could become hurt from the fear of failure emotionally, mentally, not physically. Well, if I'm working out in a gym and I have a fear of failure of doing lifting weights, yeah, I could physically hurt myself. But think about this. At 51 years old, I decided to recreate my life in the moment of fear. Let's go back. I'm 55. So think about 4 years ago, fear was on everybody's mind. I want to say, I don't think there's many people out there that did not experience a sense of fear. I've talked a lot about how I worked on my trauma during that time of fear. And what I'm talking about is when COVID hit, we all had a sense of fear. Some people had higher sense of fear. Some people had lower sense of fear. There was still fear. So for me, the fear really started. I ended up going on a cruise, and I was on one of the last cruise ships that we were allowed to get off of. Within 2 days, they were staying out at sea because of COVID, and it was lockdown and all that kind of stuff. Then I was at my job at the time for 4 days, and then they said anyone who got off a cruise ship's got to go home and quarantine. I'm like, we've been back at work for 4 days. What are you talking about? I really would have known about it. I would have gotten paid. I probably would have come home. But it was a sense of fear. We all went through that. We had sense of fear of losing everything, not just ourselves, not just our lives, but when things were shutting down, there was a fear of losing our homes, our livelihoods. That was a strong fear. So during all of that, I decided to start taking chances in my life. And I embraced the fear of failure. And for me, it was like, this is easier than everything else that's going on in the world. The fear of failure. And if I start my own business, was no different than what I'm experiencing day to day in the world. Because at the time, I have had many endeavors with, years ago, my first husband and I, we had people come to us and say, we would love for you to open up a restaurant. You two are very talented, but I had a fear of failure. Well, what if it doesn't work? What if we get in debt? There was a strong fear of failure. So at 51 years old, during the whole world's in fear, I decided I'm going to embrace this fear of failure. What more do I have to lose? So I did. I started coaching. First, I went to school, got my certifications, got more certifications, learned many different techniques. I have a plethora of certifications and many different techniques as a coach. But I decided to step into that fear. Does it still creep up here and there? Yeah. But I'm still stepping into the fear. But about last year, well, it's been about a year, I got another fear. On top of fear of failure, I got the fear of success. How can you have a fear of failure and then you have a fear of success? So I'm going to pause there because it is time for our second break. And in order for you to understand that complexity, that seesaw of fear, you've got to come back. So we are going to go on our second break. Of course, you're listening to me, Sandee Byrd, on Inspired Choices Network. You're listening to Emotional Elevator. And like we've said, if any of this resonates to you, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me at sandy@emotionalelevator.com or my personal coaching email, sandeebirdcoach@gmail.com, or go to my website. Yes, it's going to be updated at sandeebyrd.com, or just reach out to me and we can set up a call, just an introductory call where we can just chit chat about fear or whatever it is that you want to lean into, that you want to embrace. So we are going on our second break.
Are you living a life of psychological trauma or suffering from an addiction? Are you ready to learn new techniques to elevate your emotions without sustaining or obtaining them from substances that are not good for your mind or body? Then continue to tune into Emotional Elevator with trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach, Sandee Byrd, where you will learn techniques to elevate your emotions that don't require a magic pill, food, or impulsive behavior. Listen to Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific, on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd. To participate in this program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to sandy@emotionalelevator.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. As I was talking about in the first half of the show, it was all about imposed fears, like what fears are really yours and what fears got imposed on you by a parental unit or someone close to you. Could even be a spouse as you got older, like, I don't want you doing this. And then something happens, like riding in a car and you get in an accident. And then all of a sudden your spouse is always worried about you. And then you start getting the fear of driving. That's an imposed fear. And before the break, I was talking about how when I started coaching back when the big C, COVID was around, and I had a fear of failure, but then I kind of leaned into it because I'm like, okay, there's so many fears going on in life right now. So what, the fear of failure? I had multiple children out of even work during then. Out of 6 kids, we had almost 6 kids out of work. But it was like, you know what? I'm taking a chance as well here. So about a year ago, not only was I engaging in this fear of failure, then I started even learning more things, and I got a fear of success. How is that possible, you ask? Well, so the fear of failure is that my business is going to make what I want it to make and the income I want to sustain my lifestyle. And am I really going to be a great coach? And am I going to have clients and all of that? So yes, I have clients. Would love to work with you as well. So I'm still embracing that because Is it where I want it to be? No. But then this came, the fear of success. Because at one point I was chasing so many avenues that the fear of success, because I have been in a part of my life where I was working 70 hours a week. There was even weeks where I worked like 80 hours a week. And I started seeing the fear of success that I didn't go in business for myself to now possibly work 70 hours a week. So there was that. It became such a mountain of, on this side, there's a fear of failure. Oh my gosh. And on this side, it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm networking, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Oh my gosh, what if then the fear of success? Like if I've got to work 70, 80 hours a week, I don't want it. So there became this complexity of fear. But you know what? I'm only going to do what I want to do. And that is how we should all live our lives. Embrace those fears, the ones that we are willing to engage in, because I have engaged in a lot of them. And I walk with people and talk with people and work with people who I get them to engage their fears. The fear of being alone. Well, go out and eat by yourself. Because these are challenges that were brought on me because I had a fear of judgment. That if I went out to a restaurant during lunch, hustle and bustle, then I looked like I had a fear of judgment. I don't have that fear anymore. But there's still a lot of people, oh, I can't do that. Like I used to teach a self class, and one of the things in my self class is I would teach people, I want you to go eat by yourself, lunch or dinner or breakfast, but go during the busy moments of time and go sit by yourself and enjoy those moments with yourself. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, people will think I'm this. People will think, okay, that's a fear, and that's something you need to let go. Because think of all of the fears that we probably go through on a daily basis. And when are you going to start just engaging in some of them and letting them go? And then you will also understand how many of those fears were imposed on you because of we develop fears from a traumatic event that sometimes was not so traumatic to us, but we formed that bond with it because of other people around us, because of the laughs or oh my gosh, I can't believe that almost happened to you. That formed the fear. Because think about as kids, think about when we were a child. And that's why I do a lot with getting back to those childlike behaviors and introducing them back into ourselves. Think about that child. How many times maybe did you ever have, or were you ever a child? I know I had a child that touched the stove, burnt the hand, and then still would go back and get close to the stove again. And I'd be like, you don't want to touch that stove. But I wouldn't be like, oh my God, don't touch the stove. I wouldn't make it a big dramatic situation. But think of that. If we went through life and every little thing became a fear, we probably would not get out of bed. And there are people who have fears where they can't get out of bed. And I've talked a lot about my story, a lot about what I come from, and I talk a lot about what my clients come from. But it's engaging in the fears too, and making sure, are they valid fears within ourselves, or are they fears that we decided to take on that never really were ours to begin with? But then here's the flip side to a fear. Is fear sometimes a way to protect us? But does fear sometimes keep us from doing things that would bring us joy in our life? So when I talk about fear that could protect us, so let's say I was talking in the first part of the show about going to New York City and getting on a subway. If I truly had a fear of the subway, I might not have gotten on the subway. But also, in a sense, I wasn't fearful, but I knew, okay, let me make sure that I know my surroundings. That's not necessarily fear, but part of that is a fear to protect myself, you know, walking, stay focused in New York because you might get knocked down. I mean, that is a big thing there. There is millions of people, and if you're looking down, you want to play on your phone, you might get knocked down. Is that really a fear? Could be. I'm afraid that they're going to knock me down. I'm afraid I could get hurt. That is a fear. Think about it. But it's a protecting fear. Now, if I looked at everybody coming at me and I got really fearful and I had anxiety around it and I just stopped in my tracks, then that fear would inhibit me from moving forward. So when I talked about my fear of failure, my fear of success, if I really leaned into both of those, I wouldn't move forward in my life. I would stay where I'm at. But instead, I engage in that. Okay, today, why am I feeling this fear of failure? Okay, well, then let me work on this. Okay, well, why am I feeling the fear of success? Oh, yeah, because I've just been working on business stuff for 3 days straight, and I haven't really taken a moment to myself except for me to go to yoga. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm going to take 10 minutes for myself, or I'm going to take, okay, Friday, I have nothing on the calendar. I'm going to take Friday. What does Sandy want to do on Friday? I'm going to take that day. So that is engaging in those fears. So, how can you emotionally elevate yourself in your fears? By not reacting to them. And what I mean by not reacting to them is acknowledge your fear. Okay, so I'm afraid of heights. So I'm just saying this. So if you came to me and we're working together and you're like, you know what? I really want to I'm going to France and I want to go on the Eiffel Tower. Okay. What is the worst case scenario? Well, that I get sick. Okay, well, carry a bag. Well, what if I fall? What are you going to fall on? Where are you going to fall? How are you going to fall? Okay, well, then just go here instead. Find another place. So that's what working with me is all about. It's embracing fears because I decided over 50, I don't want to leave this earth whenever I'm called to leave earth and go up into my little realm. I want to know that whatever I felt, I left feeling joyful, that I never allowed fear or anxiety to stop me from doing the things I wanted to do. Because if you remember, and a lot of people have already forgotten, about 4 years ago, we were in a state of fear. If you're here in the United States, there's a lot of people that's in a state of fear come election time. But that is, but are you going to hide behind your fear or are you going to challenge your fear and embrace your fear and say, you know what? I acknowledge that's a fear of mine. What steps can I take to start acknowledging my fear and is it keeping me away from providing joy in my life? So that's the biggest thing with fear. If you have a fear of flying, and you always said, and you have it in your house, and you have this picture of Italy, and you have a fear of flying, are you going to let that fear inhibit you from going somewhere that's in your dreams? And what I suggest you don't research completely. Do not research everything. I did that, and I think that justified my fear. And what I mean by that is when I had a fear of flying, my oldest son was already flying over and doing music in Amsterdam and everything like that. And he would go over there. And I remember driving by, not flying because I wasn't flying yet again, Newark Airport. And we're seeing all the big planes. And my daughter and my middle son was saying, and Jordan's like, well, that's the one I usually fly on, one of the big ones. And I'm like, think about this. And this acknowledged my fear, and it also allowed me to stay in the fear. So if you think about, let's say there's 100 passengers on that plane and they each weigh 200 pounds. That's this much. Look up, how much does a plane weigh? Now, everyone's luggage, if they all weigh 50 because you're flying overseas, 100 luggages times 50. Oh, and then you got the pilot and you got the steward and you got all this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how much is staying up in the air. And like, I literally could tell you exactly almost how much weight and how is that ever going to stay in the air and stuff like that, to the point I was allowing me to have that fear. I was allowing that fear because I was giving it justification. I was giving it velocity within myself. And now I fly. And it's so funny because people who are around me, when I would do that, they would be like, so Sandee, you're about to fly to Kenya, because I'm going to be going to Kenya in the end of May. How much do you think is going to be up in the air? And I was like, okay, we're not going there, because I'm willing to talk about it because I'm not scared anymore, because I'm just not. I don't feel that flying is as dangerous as what I wanted to believe. I don't want to think that anymore. So I face that fear. So we are going to take our last break, and then I'm really going to step away from fear, and I'm going to talk more about elevating yourself and engaging in that fear and taking those baby steps. I've already started talking about it, but like I said, I am more than willing to face fears with you, and we can get on a call. You can reach me at Sandy@emotionalelevator.com or Sandee Byrd coach@gmail.com. Go on my website, Sandee Byrd. Right now it is going to be updated, but it's still out there. I do many different, I facilitate many different things like hypnosis, breath work. Of course, I am a laughter yoga leader in my area, but I'm also out there doing laughter yoga in many different retreats now. I am also a Lego series play, so if there's a fear you want to face and I can send you a Lego set and we can build it and we can talk about it and we can dive into it. I can just coach one-on-one with you. That is what I do, and that is what I'm an expert at. And fear is one of those that I have embraced, and I want others to embrace as well. Engage with, not embrace, but engage with your fear. But we're going to go on our last break before I run out of time. So let's go to that break.
Are you living a life of psychological trauma or suffering from an addiction? Are you ready to learn new techniques to elevate your emotions without sustaining or obtaining them from substances that are not good for your mind or body? Then continue to tune into Emotional Elevator with trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach, Sandee Byrd, where you will learn techniques to elevate your emotions that don't require a magic pill, food, or impulsive behavior. Listen to Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd. To participate in this program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to sandy@emotionalelevator.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back. We only got a couple of more minutes, but my next week's show is all about fight or flight. You want to stay tuned to that as well. But I've been talking all about fear and so many fears that I have faced. Even I didn't really go into a lot of what my clients face fear-wise, but a lot of the same fears we have faced ourselves. And I talk them through how I engaged in my fear and how sometimes our fears are imposed on us by our parental units when something might have happened to them. And now they're afraid it might happen to you. And how if we just stayed in our fear states, how we might not enjoy life. Because as my example was before we went to break was, you have a dream to go to Italy, but you're afraid of flying. You could take a boat, but the best way to get there is on a plane. And I was able to face that, and that was engaging in that. And first take that, a lot of the things I tell my clients, with the allergies, my eyes itch, my nose runs, my throat itches, is one of the first things I did when I started wanting to get on a plane. Took a short flight. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. DC is less than a 45-minute flight. You get up, you go down. I did that. It was worth it to me to possibly spend $100, maybe a little bit more. And it wasn't really to DC, it was to LaGuardia. But to do that, to fly, to do that short stint, but to engage in that. And then I started going further. And then the international adventure retreat came up for me, and I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. And yes, I did have moments where I was like, oh, can I really do this? But I did, because you know what I took with me? I took a journal, and I wrote down everything. And then I was able to engage in that journal. But it's just taking those first steps and engaging in it, recognizing, is it yours? Is it protecting you, or is it inhibiting you? Because that's sometimes what fear is. It's not necessarily our fear to begin with. Might have been something happened to us, but it's something that it brought up more fear from others. Like I said, my mother imposed the fear of me falling off of a ledge, because I almost did, and I could have been seriously injured and I could have died. But by her not wanting me to get close to an edge ever, imposed more fear on me, because I was young enough as a child to where I might never have had that fear if it wasn't for her imposing more on me. Also, sometimes we have fear to protect us. Don't go down a dark alley late at night by myself. That's to protect me. But then also the fear of failure. That inhibits me from doing what it is that's my purpose in life, and that's coaching. And that's Lego serious play, and that's laughter yoga, and that's hypnosis, and that's breath work. If I let that fear control me, I would not adventure into that, the fear of failure, but also the fear of success. That, wow, because every night I have something going on that is part of who I am. And I was afraid that if I start doing all these things. So that's what fear is. And when are you going to step and engage in your fear? Like I said, reach out to me at sandy@emotionalelevator.com, sandeebyrdcoach@gmail.com. Go on my website, Sandee Byrd. Let's have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Emotional Elevator Show. Sandee returns Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, start elevating your emotions and stop riding the emotional elevator that is stopping you from living the life you deserve.